Problem solving is the fundamental skill of any cinematographer or filmmaker. I'm not just talking about figuring out what type of shot or lens will get your creative across the best. I'm talking about solutions that solve real problems that elevate your work and make your process easier. You might be thinking that we're going to be talking about lighting or cinematography tips, but we're going to be actually diving into something that I'm really excited about: solving lighting problems using 3D printing. Before we dive into that, I want to take a step back a few years and talk about where this all comes from. I've always been fascinated by how things are designed and, more importantly, made, especially coming from an engineering background. This whole process can be looked at simply: someone running into a problem, brainstorming multiple ways to solve that, making physical prototypes of those solutions, and then doing that over and over again until they have a finished product. This is the process to create anything, and we see it especially as filmmakers with the gear that we use. There are a couple problems I run into all the time when it comes to filming subjects, as well as building my career for large and small scale productions. Some companies make fantastic products, and some others just make products that suck. I feel like the best camera equipment companies are filmmakers that produce products for filmmakers. But what if you could do that at home without needing a bunch of manufacturing or expensive equipment? Filmmaking in the last couple of years has become so accessible with the amount of companies creating affordable products that actually work. What we're going to be designing and building in this video is a method of creating a catch light on my subject in small spaces. I already know that this product does exist, but what I wanted to do is try a little experiment with different shaped catch lights. So make sure you watch the full video to see how that turns out. So this is our 3D printing station, something I kind of cobbled up together to be as most efficient as possible when it comes to our 3D prints, as well as like storing some filament we have down here, and then a small toolbox. And you can see 3D printing is amazing what you can do with it. This is a Gridfinity system that we're working on for here. We're gonna be decking out the whole studio, so something I'm really excited about too. But the main star of the show is our X1 Carbon that Bambu Lab sent to us. And I have been absolutely putting this thing through its paces. As obviously you can see, we've been printing a bunch of stuff for the printers themselves. But the main thing that I'm really excited about is that this print just finished, and this is our diffuser, and this is going to be our version 2 of that. So just on a smooth plate, so we can just pop that right off. And then we have a bunch of support material inside. This is about the hardest thing you could do, asking a 3D printer to do, is printing a dome surface like this, especially one that isn't necessarily a full circle, because of the layers that are included. So what the slicer allows you to do is get really fine layers when it comes to making dome material like this. And then on the inside, this is kind of really trippy. It looks like the fungus from The Last of Us. And this is all the support material. Always use tools when you're doing this stuff. And then we're just gonna break this stuff out. Oh, there it is. There we go. So you can see this is the support material that I chose, which is the tree type. I don't know what that is called, but it is something. But it makes my skin crawl. Anyway, we're gonna save that for another day. And then let's talk about what happened in this process of designing a product like this. Again, this is for the MC1, and the problem is with this is when they made the MC2, like any product or any company, they iterated on that and they made things better by making diffusers and everything, which they have the gel diffuser, which works well, but I'm trying to make a catch light, trying to make something big. So this is almost like 3 times the size of that. So this is exactly what we're trying to do. And then when I designed the first one, yes, I used a bunch of dimensions and I got everything in there. But the problem is that I designed this for a press fit, which I can do. But then when I press it in all the way, I don't have access to the screen. And then the wall thickness was way too thick as well. And basically this sitting at 100% is doing the job of giving me a catch light, but it is killing all my output. So what we did in this iteration, so this is my V2, I looked at this and I said, what are the problems with it? One, there's a bunch of light that's coming back here. So this is like spilling, and it could spill anywhere where I don't really want it. So I want to control that. So I used the function of printing in multiple materials, and then I printed the base off of black PLA. So then that kills that. And then the second problem was, like, if I push this in way too deep, I'm gonna basically lose all my functionality. So I changed the depth of what we have here, and then now this is just sitting on the rim, but I also increased this thickness a little bit by like 0.5 of a mil, so I had a little bit more bite when it goes into the press fit as well. So that was the second problem that we solved. Another third problem was like, yes, I designed this little hole right here to basically fit in a friction arm when mounting it, so I could mount it on my camera, which we're gonna do next. But I'm like, it doesn't really make sense just to have one of them. It makes sense to have two of them so I can put them in any other way. And I also rounded off these corners to be a little bit more smoother, a little bit less contact. And then the third problem was I feel like this is a little bit too big. And then I analyzed the MC dot diffuser that they have, and they did more of a dome rather than a full semicircle. This may work, and we're gonna try and print different types of diffusers, like what would a square one do, what would a triangle one do. And this is the beauty of 3D printing and prototyping like this, because I just put this on last night and then I was prepping for a shoot for today, and I'm going to be using this new diffuser. So let's get another MC and see the difference in what it looks like. I'm gonna put this in, then automatically, I gotta clean off some of the support material there. But again, this is the beauty of prototyping. There we go. And it's a simple, just click in. That's not going anywhere. And it's just sitting on the lip of the MC, which exactly that I wanted. And it just pops in. This one, if I push in way too deep, it's just gonna be, I don't have access to the controls. I have comfortable access to everything right now, and I can just flip this on. So again, another thing with this is that I'm dealing with PLA, and I have this set to right now, like 6,500 Kelvin, but it looks a little bit warm. I'm not going for something that is going to replicate what we're looking for when it comes to creating the CCT scale or anything. I'm just looking for a diffuser for a catch light for the commercials I do. I'm not gonna get that technical when it comes to those things. So like I could look at different types of PLA and see what they do and just print test piece to see how the light affects that. So let's try this one now. And there we go. And you can already see the difference when it comes to output as well as the color. These are both set to 6,500 Kelvin. And then you can see the color accuracy is a lot better. It's not perfect, but the difference is between these two is that I use a wall thickness of 1 millimeter here and then a wall thickness of 2 millimeter, because when I was originally designing this, I'm like 2 millimeters is gonna be like just thick enough, but actually it's way too thick and this can stand a big impact. And then because we're dealing with a dome surface, 1 millimeter is a bit pliable, obviously if I push into it a little bit, but I don't see this being a problem. But now I have my little diffuser, and that is gonna be my catch light. So I'm excited to use this tonight on a shoot that we're doing, because it is going to be very low light, is going to be very moody, and we're gonna be doing a lot of color play. And I'm also gonna be lighting with a bunch of warm fixtures. And I know my light percentages are gonna be below 10%. So in that situation, I know I can use a little diffuser like this. So now it's going to basically be sitting on a small stand or on my camera. And that's the next thing and the functionality that I want to test. Yes, it works as a light, but does it work and have its function? Okay, so we had to come up with a little solution because of my design mistake here. So I just pulled out a little 90-degree bracket. This one's made by like Tilta or something. And then basically I just need to offset the MC so I could basically have another mounting point on the back here. So I'm going to put this in now. It's very satisfying. So one thing that I probably will have to design back into this is when I flex this and I push this in, I can feel like that this is a risk of potentially breaking. So I might just put supports in the middle, so it just has some support in the middle just to have that. And then I might do that around the edges or something, not to affect the diffuser at all. So now we have a little bit of mounting point, and I can put my little nut back on here. And then I can put this on, and that gives me a screw point. Bang. Now you can manipulate this. I want this on the top, and then this can be right beside my matte box here. Then tighten that down, turn my diffuser on. Bang. And obviously I'll tighten everything up on the day, but this was the whole point of what I was trying to create. A little diffuser that could clamp to the side of my camera, or I can even put it on the top of my mount box here, because the Tilta matte box has these mounting points here. And this is what I was looking to exactly do. So obviously there's some iterations, and this is what I love about the design process, is you design something out of thin air, or you get inspirations from something, you come up with a physical prototype. This is my V1, this is my V2, and then you go on to V3. So the biggest thing when it comes to the design process is not to be frustrated or mainly discouraged when your first, second, or third idea doesn't work. Any design, any product that you've seen has probably gone through multiple people, multiple sets of iterations, probably up to 10, 20, 30, depends on the project. And that is the point. Even Aperture, when they come up with the MC Pro 2, they solved all the problems that was with the first one. Obviously it was revolutionary at the time, but things get outdated. So this will work in the time being, but I know it is a limited and it's a one-time concept, and then I'm gonna move on to another iteration where I have those ribs in the middle so this can actually last. So I'm excited to try this tonight, and I really hope it works. And that's one of those things too. We can actually go upstairs quickly and test it with this camera, and I think it will do its job as just creating a catch light and a highlight. Let me just open up this window so we have some sort of motivation over here, okay? And then without, with. What gives you a catch light is having a big source. If I was beside this window and I was staring right into it, it would give you a catch light. If I had a big diffuser next to me and a big scrim or a big light, that's what gives you a catch light, the size of it. But what also gives you a catch light, and a lot of people do, is they just give a little point source. When it comes to my commercial work, I like to make a little soft catch light. I don't like to add it with a harsh light in the back. And this is why exactly I wanted something like this for my MC kit. Because I'm a filmmaker and I can't afford to buy an MC Pro 2 kit. And this was my immediate. So thank you to Bambu Labs for sending us their X1C Carbon. I actually bought the P1S and I absolutely loved it. And this is an upgrade to that. And these have been working in tandem and are literally irreplaceable and something I can't even go back to when it comes to creating little small things around here. And that's what we're gonna get into next. Okay, so we have version 1, version 2, and now we are going to be working on version 3. So what we learned from using on this shoot is I learned actually a lot of things about how I design this, some flaws, things I like, things I don't like. So generally, based off the overall footprint, I like how this surface is a lot more concave and not necessarily an entire semicircle. This really worked well for output, as well as just the size and footprint of everything. And I know that I designed these tabs on here and this was just supposed to be a nice press fit in, but what kept happening on set is we would use the MC, maneuver it somewhere else, and then we'd have to push it back in. And then what ended up happening is these tabs just started to break off. And then my AC, who also does a lot of 3D printing as well, he's like, why don't you just design a brim that goes all the way around? I'm like, that is a really good idea, and I don't know why I didn't think of that beforehand, but that's just the design process. Sometimes you get stuck in your ways and you need to step away from it. That wasn't really designed well as well. And then when we were putting this together, I tried to put the friction arm in and the tabs didn't necessarily work. So now going back into our design program, I changed all these things. So the first thing I did is actually extend the thickness of this by another millimeter, just to give us some more grip when we're actually press fitting it in. I feel like that would be a lot nicer. Then I also widened this gap as well of what the fitting is going into, just to give me a little bit more play. The press fit is nice, but I feel like it could be a tad bit better with a looser tolerance. So that's what we're going with, and we're gonna test fit that. Then instead, I know that I wanted to have 2 access points. I feel like a thumb access point would be good at the top, so you can just pull it out or even hold it like this. But I'm just going with a big one on the bottom so I can actually measure and fit the friction arm that I want to use for this, because I want to put it on a camera, I want to put it on a stand. And the last thing that we did is add a lip and support around the entire MC, rather than just the corners, which was just an idea I don't know why I thought would work. So if I kind of go to the top view of this and go to the sketch that we're looking at down here, I also increased this distance so we have a lot more basically material interacting with this backplate. And then also having that lip, which is about 2.5 millimeters, which is gonna be more than enough rather than just having these tabs up the side. The black material really worked good on the back side just to kill the spill, the light not come bouncing back. And this really perfectly acted as a catch light. So what we're gonna do now is print version 3, then also we're gonna print a bunch of different variants of this in different shapes to see what that looks like on a subject's face. So that's what we're gonna do next. One thing I obviously like about Bambu Labs is their product, but also what they've done with the 3D printing, designing, or really any community. We are a filmmaking community, and inside the 3D printing community, there is another filmmaking community. So I really like how Bambu Lab has done that, because they have models that you can print for free. People design, they upload them, they also design some themselves. And for example, this whole section was designed by somebody else. I just had to download it and 3D print it. It's a holder for my AMS. And then I also want to put some desiccant as well as a humidity gauge in here. Somebody already designed this and I can just download it and 3D print it. So this is my whole intention with making a diffuser for people that don't necessarily have the money or funds to buy and upgrade their whole system by getting new aperture gear. Maybe that somebody has a 3D printer that they can print this themselves and use it. So there's just so many possibilities what Bambu Labs has allowed for the community. I really like it. So I'm just preparing our build plate right now. This is my process. I know that people recommend that you use like hot soapy water and everything like that. I just use a disinfectant thing and then just wipe it down with some paper towel. It's good enough for me. And then I'm gonna load this into our printer. I'm gonna turn the light on so we can do that. And then if you're looking at a specific model, the X1 Carbon is their flagship model, but there's also the P1S and P1P. So they're just like level ups in like what you were exactly looking for. The Bambu Lab X1 series is really good if you are just getting into 3D printing, because it has a touch interface that is very easy, user-friendly. They have a bunch of models on here that you can already use. Well, this one takes a little bit more skill. It's not necessarily not user-friendly. It's still good to use. But this is more for people who already have design software, they have CAD experience, and they just want to upload something and just print it. This is more user-friendly, and if you're just looking to have some fun with 3D printing. That's why I love Bambu Labs, because they have something for everyone with amazing quality. So we just put our build plate on. I'm going to be using some adhesive. So I'm just going to be applying this liberally to the entire pad here. The next thing that we're gonna do is going to export this. So I'm gonna save this. And then actually right now, while we're here, I'm gonna add that thumb hole to the top, because it isn't as big. Now, this isn't perfectly designed because there are some flaws that I already can tell. For example, like if you're trying to fill it this nicely, it won't really do it because we're in the middle of a circle, and it's not the best edge to do it, but it's a 3D printer. And I know when you're designing things, usually people are designing things to be made by hand or by a CNC or by a mill or anything like that. That's why I love 3D printing, because you can really design anything that you want, even if it's bad, and the 3D printer is just gonna figure it out. So I'm pretty happy with this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna export this as an STL, and you can see that we're on V9, even though we're on V3. So there's been a lot of design in between and iterations between actually printing everything like that. And then I open up my Bambu Lab software, and this is really intuitive to use. And you can see, this is the library that we have access to. There's a controller, Octopus controller for your PlayStation. I printed this phone holder. Actually, Charlie is using it right now. There's so many things out here. I even printed this key holder that's over there. You guys can't see it right now. Tamper, everything you could think of. So I'm just gonna go to prepare. First, I'm going to go to my device actually, and it is the X1 Carbon. And then I am going to import my design. Automatically, it doesn't know what exactly you're trying to do with this or the orientation, but it automatically puts it in the orientation that you want. And for myself, I don't want this to be black. I want this to be just our matte PLA, which is going to be white, but I also want to change the bottom of this to that black material that we're looking at. So what they also have is a really good feature. If I click on that, I can basically click any surface that I want, and I can make it the color of the filament I'm interested in. So in this case, I'm interested in the black, and I can just paint this here, and it's gonna fill that. but there's also a better way to do it based on layers. So what I want to do is I obviously want the dome to be white, but I want the back surface to be black. But I forgot this thickness that I'm actually using here. So I can use their measurement tool by clicking on this surface, and then I have to click on the inside surface. Well, I'm just gonna click on this line, and it tells me it's 3 millimeters away. Perfect. I can go back to my fill and then set this to 3 millimeters. And now this is going to fill from the face I select 3 millimeters up. And I'm just gonna select this big face here. Bang, and it basically paints all that layer of that bottom of what's gonna be basically on the slip, similar to this one, and it's going to print that in the black material. One, this saves me on the white material because it takes a lot to print, unfortunately, and then I just have an abundance of black material. If I printed this all white, it'd be kind of annoying. So I like to do that when I'm trying to use different filaments. And then if you're using like an expensive material, or if I wanted the backing to be super strong, I could print it out of ABS, and then the rest to be PLA, hopefully, if they obviously mesh together and melt together well. But if I wanted this to be translucent, I could do that with different materials as well. So like the possibilities when it comes to 3D printing are endless, which I love about it. So now I have everything ready to go. The next thing that I'm going to do is actually set up my supports. Because when you 3D print something, especially when you print something like this with a dome or any overhang, it has to print it in layers, and then as it comes to this point up here, there's nothing to print on. I'll make some support material in the center that allows it to do that, and there's a bunch of different ones that you can do. I'm going to enable that, and then the one that I like to use is the tree one. So now that I have that and I slice my plate, it's automatically gonna generate everything I need for it. It's gonna take a bit because this is a pretty complex print, especially when you're printing something like this, domes. So let's see how it does. Okay, so it did pretty well. The only thing is I have my purge tower here, and what a purge tower is basically if it prints in black, it needs to make a separate little tower where it can change the filament, so it makes sure that it's not mixing any of the colors. So basically it changes the filament, extrudes a bunch out, and then prints on that purge tower first, and then goes to my model to make sure nothing is in the way. So the only problem with this model right now is that this purge tower is in the way. So I'm just gonna move everything out of the way, and the model is good to go, and you can see all those creepy little trees in there, and those are gonna be my support material. So now I'm going to print plate. I already have my bed prepped. I'm gonna go through the bed leveling process. I don't need to do the flow dynamics calibration because I haven't switched materials. I'm gonna enable time lapse, which is good for us because you guys are gonna see it print, and then I'm just going to send it. And it's as easy as that. I remember when I was working with 3D printers when I was doing my master's in engineering, that we had models where you would have to load it onto SD card, bring the SD card to your printer, and then offload it and set it up to print, and then set all your settings inside the printer, which were super annoying. I can just use this system. It's connected to the Wi-Fi. Even if the printer was somewhere else, I could even use it from my phone from home. That's how crazy and well thought out this system is, especially when people who are designing things or just prototyping or even using this as a manufacturing process. So right now it is set. It tells me how long it's gonna take, and it can monitor all my temperatures and everything that's going on here. I can even increase the speed. I can turn off the lamp and turn it back on. But now the printer is set up to go, and then I don't have to worry about this. I could set this overnight and it's good to go. A lot of people are saying like, oh, if you set up a 16-hour print, you have to be there the whole time? And no, there's probably, I've only had these two printers fail on me once because of user error, because I didn't put the bed on properly, or I didn't put enough glue on the build plates because I was using smooth build plates, or that I didn't even put the right amount of spool in here, and I was using third-party spools because of just filament and getting it on Amazon. So this printer has only failed on me because of my fault and not necessarily its fault. So super happy with this. We're gonna print a bunch of different models and then test them and see how they work. So last night I printed the new version of this MC Dot and everything went wrong. So I sized a few things differently. I tried new things that I thought would be improvements, but ended up being kind of things that I had to iterate on more. So I increased the size, but then that has a loose fit now, so this doesn't even work anymore. And then this lip worked. And then also in between, I had a filament change. So like the consistency across the whole thing is just gone. So I didn't let that discourage me. And as you can see that we have 3 versions here that are going to be going in the garbage. But this is the final version. Finally, we have something that actually works, that is gonna work repeatedly. So the improvements are, we have this space here that we can actually put a friction arm in. And then consistent finish across the whole thing. It's not gonna matter that much when it comes to seeing a catchlight or reflection in somebody's eye. And then if you just wanna hold it like this, there's 2 finger holes to put it in. And then I also printed this on the textured plate. So our printer came with a textured plate as well as a smooth plate. And these are really good if you're trying to get certain details and just certain different finishes. Actually, I just printed this coffee holder that was somebody else's design, and I used a textured plate for this lid, and it just looks like plastic. It doesn't look like a 3D printed material. So that was really cool. Anyways, back to the dot. The next thing that I wanted to do is design a bunch of different shapes. I already have the back plate design. That is great, that's functioning and it's gonna work now. So I'm super happy about that. I have the circle one, which I'm gonna be using in all the productions, but I was really curious and wanted to do an experiment of what different catchlight looks like. So I designed a pyramid one, which is going to be a triangle here. So it's just basically copying these same dimensions and then putting it just on another shape. This pyramid was actually really scratched my brain in terms of getting something that was supposed to be hollow. And there's so many ways to skin a cat, that's usually the saying. So I had to kind of figure that out my own way, but I was on a bunch of forums to figure that out. And then the next one was this square. So this is just an empty box at the moment because I designed the lid to be different with these tabs that we're just gonna glue on. Because when you talk about 3D printing and you're trying to print something that doesn't necessarily have any support, so in this empty space here, you can't really do that. It does print supports, but it would need to print supports off this center where there's nothing is, and it would have to reach up into these corners. So I'm just saying, I'm gonna save myself some filament. I'm gonna save this whole design process as well as the print time. And I'm just gonna print them in 2 separate things and then just glue them together. But I did put these little corners on the ends here, so it just registers in and it's like a nice tight press fit. So then I can just add glue on so we can clear up all those seams. So that's exactly what's happening now, but I wanted to go over to our printers here, and then overnight I set up our P1S to print our triangular diffuser. So this is the textured plate I was talking about. And then Bambu Labs does offer multiple. Ooh. Well, and the support just came right off. That was much easier than the circle because the only thing we really had to support was that center there because I didn't want it to go to an entire little point. And then again, that's the textured plate. I have a smooth plate right here. So sometimes they sell them as double textured or smooth and textured. So this just gives you that finish, which gives you that really polished. It looks like a finished project. It's like something that I would be manufactured or like extrusion, nothing like something that looks 3D printed. So we're gonna put this in. Same design, same plate, just pops in. That's what I love about 3D printing because it's so repeatable. And then we're gonna turn this on. Ooh, it's actually pretty sick. And then because if we look at the geometry of how things are printed, and then we just have these 2 things side by side, you can see how 3D printer has trouble with printing certain things. Domes and everything, if you think about it, the layers are coming all the way up to the top, and then it's trying to print something that's infinitely small and coming to like a very thin thickness. And then if you think about a pyramid, the layer lines are so clean that it looks like one uniform surface because it has support and it can print it one by one by one. If I just had this little top at the top here, it's going to a point, it would just be a dot and then you would see that layer. So that's why domes and everything are much harder to print. So I might think of something that's a little bit more feasible for this, where it might be just a cylinder with a lid on it. That might be something I'm gonna experiment with. But right now on the X1C, we have, I'm just gonna open up this for you guys right now, the square version of this printing. So again, same design. I use the same methods to have a black backing and then printing with the white. And then with the AMS unit, it makes that such a breeze because I can just tell what filament is in which spool, and then it loads it up and prints it automatically, and I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to manually change the filament, which you had to do in a bunch of other printers. So this function is available on all their scale of printers, from the A1 Mini all the way up to the X1C. It's just a different system. So I recommend, if you're going to buy a 3D printer, especially a Bambu Lab one, get an AMS unit because it saves you so much headache and it opens up the possibilities of things that you can print. So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a nice interview setup, something I would use this for. I'd use it in an interview setup to get a catch light if I didn't have a massive space or a massive source, or I would use it in a situation where I'm shooting like a narrative commercial or any type of commercial and I want that big catch light without using a big source. So that's the next thing that we're gonna test out with the circle, with the triangle, as well as with the square, to see what it really does to the eyes. Okay, we have all our different types of catch light printed, and I actually printed another one, which we're gonna be showing later, but we are gonna be using them in a typical interview setup and stuff. I would use them for commercials all the time. Like I said, I recently used the version 2 of the bubble on a production and worked flawlessly, and I wanna do an experiment with different shapes to see what they'd actually do. But let's go a little back and see what actually makes a catch light. So if we look at our subject here, as she's looking into the camera, this would be a typical interview setup. If I was doing something on a backdrop, it'd be a little bit more curated depending on what the creative is, but I just want to do a simple example on a black backdrop to show you guys. And right now I have a massive catch light in her eye because I am in an ideal conditions. And that's what we're looking for when we're developing interests and those big catch lights, so we don't look like we're going into a black void if somebody has darker eye color or something like that. And to achieve that, we are going to use a big soft source. So right now I have a 1000C set up on a Light Dome 150, and this would be something I'd use in a typical interview setup or even commercials. You see them used all the time in this sort of fashion with big soft boxes. A lot of people think if you're looking for catch lights or big soft lights, what you're trying to do is just throw as much diffusion as possible over your light source, but what you want to do is take your light source and make it as big as possible, and that's exactly what we're doing here. And the closer I bring it to my subject, the bigger catch and I'm going to get in my subject's face, and also more wrap and bigger softness. Trying to make it as big as possible. And to give you guys some context, this is only set at 5%. And then typical interview, I have a floppy or a bounce. I'm just trying to bring in some more contrast because we have a big room. And then I just have a backlight here. So pretty moody, pretty standard, but what if we're in some sort of unideal situations, or I'm shooting a commercial where I don't have room to put this giant setup? And I'm usually working with a flex light, panel light, tube lights, or my favorite light, the Amaran F22C. So we're gonna swap this out for that as our key light, and then see how we can use our little diffusers to make a bigger catch light. So this is my typical light I'm using for commercials, and I'm using this as a key light, wrap, anything, top light source. It really depends on the creative, but this is my go-to light with this setup. I'm using a Matthews mini boom, baby boom, and then we're gonna plug this into the power. So we're gonna just start with this configuration in a situation where I wouldn't necessarily have a lot of room. And then we're gonna turn down the intensity and also match the color temperature, 5600. We'll go a little bit warmer, go with 5000. And then I'll put this at 10% and then see what we're doing on the monitor here. So let's get on our Amaran. And then that's with it off. We've just a very strong backlight. This is the look I like to go for, especially when I'm doing interviews. And then we have our F22C. So this is a little bit more moody, right? We have the grid on it as well as the 2 layers of diffusion. Then you can see that we get the catch light in her left eye and not so much in her right eye. And this depends on the lighting that you're trying to do. So if it was ideal in in a location like this where you have access to move everything around, this would be no problem. And then if I wanted to open up that a little bit more, get some more output as well as a bigger catch. It's almost the same size, but slightly bigger. But you can see that the Light Dome 150, even if you point at them right now, you can see the size difference, that it gives you a bigger catch. So now in a situation that I don't necessarily have a catch light, let's create that so we can start using our little mini diffusers. So in a situation like that, you're usually dealing with, I'm just gonna turn this off for now, a top lit situation, or you're dealing with wides where you necessarily can't get the camera in a specific spot, but basically I'm gonna recreate that right now. And usually this is the commercial setup I'm usually doing. And then it's usually top lit with something along these lines. And then I'm just gonna put the grid back on here so we're not spilling everywhere. And I'm just doing this by eye, seeing what is visible on the subject's face, but I would typically be doing something like this, then I would move it in a tiny bit as well. Perfect. Let's see what we're working with our image. And yes, something a little bit more moody, something a little bit what we like to do here at Tenfold, right? Obviously, I would have more lift in the back depending on what you're doing, but this is just an example to show you guys, right? And then in this case, I would replace this floppy and I would bring in a bounce because we're just a little bit too moody. So let's just open this up a bit. There we go. And that looks like something that we usually would create. But now the problem is, my light's all the way up there. In this situation, I have to boom it out. I have no catch light. So let's try our little diffusers to see if it does anything. I'm gonna go with the standard little ball first. I'm gonna grab an MC actually too. Have the 4 standard kit, and so I invested in when I started. And then I'm just gonna do this by hand, move it around and see what it does. And this just pops in and it's good to go. Turn this on. I'm gonna set this to 5,000 Kelvin. And right now I have it set at 50%. And then I'm just gonna be using this monitor here and seeing what we can do. Would usually have it on a small stand like this. Obviously we're gonna be trying different shapes, but I have this set up to do that. But if I was in a situation where I just need a small catch, I could just put this up. It adds a little bit of levels to her face, and then I get a catch light right in her eye there. And then as I get closer, I would obviously decrease the intensity, but that catch even gets more. And if I'm just off frame here, that is what I would be looking for. So this is really good when you're doing a lot of tight shots or a lot of face shots where you're in a commercial environment and you don't have basically the logistics to set up a big frame, an 8x, 6x, or even a big softbox like this. You just have a footprint of a small stand or even attaching this to the camera and putting it in any position that you want. Obviously, if it was a little bit more frontal, we'd be flattening out their subject's face, but generally I just keep it off to the side and then point it at them at a 45-degree angle without getting too much into frame. And we're gonna punch in a little bit as well to see what each of these soft boxes do, but it's a really interesting experiment that I wanted to do, but I'm going to be implementing this in my commercial work all the time. So let's move the camera forward and really see what these catch lights do. And this would be the scenario that you'd usually use them for. I actually recently saw an Instagram post where I do a lot of my research as well as just get a lot of inspiration. And the DP who shot Better Call Saul, in all his shots, you would always see a little twinkle in his eye. And the way he did that is he had a 1x1 panel that he would always just put like behind camera over here, and then he would point it right directly at his subject, and that's how he always got the twinkle in his eye. And I was really inspired by that, because I'm like, a lot of my work, I'm missing these catch lights. Usually a lot of the times it's like 50-50. I didn't necessarily know exactly what I was doing, and I saw a lot of DPs using the MC dot for the MC Pro 2s. So if I put this over here right now, you can see that that little twinkle is there from our catch light. And then if I bring it in while decreasing my intensity, you can see that catch light even more, and then you can see that shape in her eye. Even if I bring it in a little closer, I start flaring the lens. Obviously, I don't want to do that, but then I get that dot. It's more prominent in the shadow side of her face because we're looking at layers of interest. If I were just to hold this here, and then we have the shadow, and then we have the triangle of Rembrandt lighting, and then we have, if you look in our eye, you have all that mixtures of light and dark that give us so much interest that we're looking for. And even if I wanted to, I could attach this to camera. If I wanted a portable catch light anytime, it would work as well. Just set it as low intensity. We proved that this works. Let's try different shapes to see what they do. So the inspiration around this is I wanted to do basic shapes, but I'm like, what happened if the director wanted to practically put like a twinkle in the talent's eye? I'm like, that would be a pretty cool idea. It's pretty ludicrous and like unrealistic, but I just want to try, because with 3D printing, you can basically make anything that you want. And there we have our little star catch light. Let's bring this up to eye level. And yeah, I figured this would be the problem. If you were to see where you actually start seeing the star shape in her eye, the catch light would have to be literally there. I can see the star in both of her eyes, and it's actually really funny. I didn't expect it to work that well, but I knew that this wouldn't be as prominent as a shape just because you saw how close that softbox was, right? And to get a big circular shape in their eye, this star would have to be that big. Or we could do the opposite of making these points really skinny and long, but I don't have the really capabilities of doing that with the 3D printer that we have. So this is the best I could get with the shapes and everything like that, especially designing around the MC. So proof of concept, it works. If I'm trying to do some macro or specialty shots, it would work really well. And we're gonna actually try that after, but first we're gonna try each of these light soft boxes to see what they do. And then to give you guys some comparison, this is like the regular MC. And then if I turn down the percentage on this too, you could do the same thing. Like this is no problem at all. And then it gives you that little dot on the side to give you a catch. And I used to do this with the stock diffusion all the time. But again, with the principle of a catch light, if you make it bigger, it is more prominent, as well as it gives it a layer of diffusion, makes it a little bit softer and pleasing for the faces. And then this is the best one as I can see, just because it gives me a lot of control over levels of the face. And it is a big enough circle where I get a nice catch light. Even if I bring it out there and I rotate it off to the side, this is the perfect way I would use this. And if I was in a tight interview space, this would be my setup. These are my go-to lights to make a moody interview like this, and then I'd have something shoot up into the ceiling if it was a small space. So these are perfect for small spaces and commercial work, and then anytime that you're just missing that little catch light. So we are using the Laowa sword lenses. These are really cool because they're all macro lenses, and I believe the ratio, it's a 2x macro, and they're native E-mount, which is very nice. And the reason why I like these and just getting some test footage with them is because how close you can get with all focal lengths. So there's a 15, 35, 60, and they're pretty fast at T2.9 and full frame. So really enjoying using these. So for macro shots, we're gonna do a little masterclass on macros. Everybody thinks that you have to shoot at like an open aperture 2.9. No, because I'm so close, I can stop this down to like a 4, 5, 6, whatever I really want. And then because I'm shooting on a Sony FX3, I have access to dual base ISO. So that gives me a lot to work with and play with as well. So if I'm gonna start this at a 5.6 so I get her whole eye in focus. And then I'm just gonna adjust my ND to exposure that I'm happy with. And then I can see that we could use some contrast. I'm just gonna lock this floppy in, and then we have a nice macro shot. So I'm at a T8 and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna bring this in to get a little bit more contrast, but I'm just lacking some levels and some detail. So I'm just gonna boost my F22C. Right now we're sitting at 13%. Great, I'm at a point where I like the shape on her face, but not necessarily, I'm not getting any levels in the eye or getting that catch that we're looking for. So cue in our little bubble diffuser here, and then we get some interest back into her eye. And now I can increase the levels of this to get some more level and then some interest back there. All right, so this is when you start shooting macro things start getting a little bit more obvious and you can see the reflections of everything. And then this would give me that perfect catch, and even if I wanted to move this in closer, I could bring it in even right here. Looks like the mood in her eye. But again, this wouldn't be the best necessary use case. I would probably use it out here or something like that just to add a little bit more interest. But what we're gonna actually try out here is our star one to see if we actually see the shape. That is hilarious. We see the full star in her eye, and then I can move it around different places and orient it. Obviously, we're killing the shape on what we have, and you can see that star perfectly, even if I put it over here. And then you can actually see the lines of everything. You can see my hand, the reflection. So it's a little bit jarring. I'd probably have it off here, just to give us the shape that we want and to have some interesting shapes going on in the face. So when I talk about shape, I talk about the star in her eye as well as the shape on her face. So really interesting and seeing what we can do. And let's do something that's a little bit more narrative. This would be a really interesting insert to have for a commercial or even like an interview, something very intimate to show off something. And then you could have the star off a little bit here, and then we can see that in her far eye. And then if we wanted to do a rack to this close eye. So filmmaking and 3D printing. We had access to a 3D printer. I wanted to solve a problem by getting this bubble diffuser for my cameras to get better looking shots. And didn't want to upgrade to the MC Pro 2s and get the whole system to do that because it cost money. So we designed something, 3D printed it, and then went to the next step of possibly looking at innovations. And that's what I love about the design community and everything that is involved in that process. So if you guys are interested in more engineering and 3D printing as well as integrating that into filmmaking, let us know in the comments below. We really enjoyed making this video, so I'll see you in the next one.